Hey everyone, welcome. It is Tuesday, June 24th. My name is Janessa Goldbeck. I am the CEO of Vet Voice Foundation, which is a national 501c3 nonpartisan veterans organization that works to elevate the voices of veterans and military families in our democracy. And we're the sister organization of Vote Vets. So if you're new to us, that's who we are. Really excited to have you with us today. So we're here today to talk about potentially the nation's largest ever public land sell-off. Senator Mike Lee, a senator from Utah, slipped some language into the Senate reconciliation budget bill earlier this month that would have made over 250 million acres of public land eligible for sale to private industry, to developers, to private equity. I think that maybe he thought we weren't going to notice, but we sure did. Veterans, hunters, fishermen, outdoorsmen, and public lands defenders have been making noise about this sell-off all week, really demonstrating how vital public lands are to who we are as a nation, to who we see ourselves as people, and for many of us, to our livelihoods and our economy in our local towns and states. So we know there's been a lot of things going on. There's been a lot of language about this bill. We wanted to invite Senator Mike Lee actually to join us to share his perspective and why he is so intent on privatizing public lands. We reached out to his office and invited him to join. Didn't hear back, unfortunately. He has been posting on social media, but he's always available to join us to explain his position to vets and military families, why he is so intent on selling off public lands. But unfortunately, we didn't hear from him. So we'll keep the chair open over the course of the conversation in case he does pop in. But we're really fortunate today to be joined by someone who has been an absolute incredibly staunch defender of public lands. He actually is such a advocate for public lands that he formed a bipartisan caucus, the House Public Lands Caucus, in Congress, in order to not only work to defend public lands from people who want to privatize them like Senator Lee, but also to proactively ensure that we are conserving and protecting wild spaces. So I'm super thrilled and excited to be here today and able to introduce Congressman Gabe Vasquez from New Mexico. Gabe is joining us for a few minutes to kind of give us an update on where things stand with the Senate bill and what he's doing in Congress across the aisle to make sure that we protect and preserve our public lands. Welcome, Gabe.
Thank you so much, Janessa. I really appreciate the kind words and introduction. I really appreciate the work that you're doing at Vet Voice Foundation, along with your team and everybody who's on this call today. BHA, all those who served in uniform to protect and defend our nation as well. And part of the reason, I'm sure many of us did it, is because we want to protect the nation that we all love and care for, and that includes our vast system of public lands, one of America's best ideas, in my opinion. So when I got to Congress, this is my second term now, and I represent a huge district full of beautiful public lands. Southern New Mexico, contrary to people's beliefs, isn't just a big desert. We have 4 national forests. We have a national park, 2 national monuments, 180 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border, the nation's first wilderness in the Gila, and so much more. So the opportunity to get outside and enjoy some of these treasures are part of why I ran for Congress. And so when I came here, I really wanted to work in a bipartisan way on these issues that are so dearly important to me, but also to those rural economies that depend on public lands to help fuel tourism and visitation. One of the projects I got to work on before coming to Congress was building out this dark sky sanctuary called the Cosmic Campground. Now, I'm not much, I'm not an amateur astronomer or an astrophotographer. There are people who are. But look, I appreciate that canopy of stars that shrouds us whenever we go camping, whenever we have the opportunity to camp with our families and our friends. And it turns out that one of the darkest places in the country was in Catron County, New Mexico, which is in my district, which also happens to be the most conservative, the most Republican county in the state of New Mexico. I didn't let that stop me. What we had to do was end up getting bipartisan support for this effort, because to nominate a site as an international dark sky sanctuary, the Forest Service has to manage this particular area for its low light quality. that it currently has. And to do that, they needed a letter of support from the local county commission. And that was tough to get, but it was one of my first experiences working in a bipartisan way to create what is now called the Cosmic Campground, part of the Gila National Forest. And that drove visitation to Catron County, which is very rural. It takes hours to drive there from Albuquerque. You're talking 4 to 5 hours. From Las Cruces, probably another 3 to 4 hours. From Flagstaff, maybe 4 or 5 hours. So for that community to get this resource was really important to them, because it drove the local shops and local tourism economy in the small towns that surround it. And so the power of public lands, for all of the qualities that they hold, including the wildlife that we enjoy, the outdoor recreation opportunities, the reason they should be bipartisan and continue to be a bipartisan issue is because in these rural communities across the West, public lands have been an economic driver for many years, but they also are home to our traditions, like hunting and fishing. And so I grew up hunting and fishing all across this district. I grew up also hunting in the San Luis Mountains in Mexico with my grandfather, two landscapes that are interconnected through the Animas Range and the Baloncillo Mountains. And so, it's kind of in my blood to be able to come to Congress and be able to support these really important bipartisan policies. And so when we saw the first House proposal that came to the floor that sought to eliminate and sell off thousands of acres of public lands in the states of Utah and Nevada, I got with an old pal of mine, Ryan Zinke, and he was actually Secretary of the Interior when I was working on protecting Organ Mountain Desert Peaks National Monument, which is literally in my backyard and right outside of Las Cruces, New Mexico. And at that time, I don't know if you all remember, but this was several years ago, there was a monument review that was undertaken by the first Trump administration. And some of the Obama era national monuments that were created through the Antiquities Act were put on the chopping block, and several of those monuments were reduced. I believe Grant Staircase and Bears Ears. But I remember talking to the Secretary of Interior at that time, and we were arguing about the language related to objects of scientific importance as they are defined in the Antiquities Act. And I was arguing that wildlife was an object of scientific importance. And I don't think he and I shared the same view on that point, but he actually got to hear loud and clear from what are now my constituents that we loved our national monument and that we wanted to keep it as it was. And so our monument was not touched during that time, but it allowed me to, when I came to Congress and Representative Zinke came to Congress at the same time, we kind of reconnected over that issue. And that led to some productive conversations and talks. And public lands are just as important in Montana as they are in New Mexico. We value them greatly. And we share some of the same traditions, especially for those folks that like to hunt and fish. So the idea to come up with this public lands caucus was a shared idea from both of our teams. And I said, Ryan, you're going to have to get some Republicans on board. I said, because I've got like 50 Democrats that are wanting to join this thing. And so, we want to make this truly a bipartisan effort. We want to make sure that we can make the progress on defending public lands, also improving access, improving management, which are kind of the three pillars of this caucus. And so he went to his colleagues in Montana and in Idaho and in Arizona and other places. And we were able to get a first initial slate of about 8 Republicans and 8 Democrats on this caucus. And so, by coming together and announcing the caucus, our first announcement was our opposition to the House provision that would have sold off those lands in Utah and Nevada. And that's where Zinke drew a line in the sand and said, I'm not going to vote for this overall proposal if these land sales are included. Mike Simpson did something similar. And so we were able to successfully kill that provision in the House, only to see it come back from the dead in true zombie fashion, more powerful and more and uglier, with this proposal from Senator Mike Lee that brought the entire advocacy community around public lands together across the West and across the nation in a hugely impressive way. I can tell you, I've worked on a lot of conservation campaigns. I have not seen conservationists from every stripe come together more, Republicans and Democrats, anglers and birders, RVers and mountain bikers, come together to protect this special resource. And so Senator Mike Lee's proposal, as you all know, was egregious, sought to sell off at least 3.3 million acres across the West. And I think each state, with the exception of Montana, sought to lose hundreds of thousands of acres. And we mapped it out in New Mexico. These weren't lands that were garbage lands that are eligible, that should be made eligible for disposal. They were places where we access rivers. They were places outside of Carlsbad Caverns National Park. There are places in my district like Otero Mesa, the largest remaining intact Chihuahuan desert grassland habitat, home to New Mexico's only native pronghorn herd in the state. That was on the list, right? And so this notion that somehow these lands were disposable, I think, was BS to begin with. And luckily for us, we got a ruling last night from the Senate parliamentarian, who is kind of the one that decides, what's germane and what's not when it comes to a particular proposal. And in this reconciliation package, everything has to be a budgetary decision that gets made within the context of this bill in order for it to be germane. And what we saw was that Senator Mike Lee was trying to fundamentally alter the way that we sell or transfer federal lands, going outside of the FLTMA and the FLTFA process to achieve this, to raise a few bucks, was actually ruled not germane because it fundamentally changed the way that Congress has decided it will dispose of eligible lands. And that is through a public input process that many communities already use for things like housing and infrastructure, senior centers. I mean, you name it. BLM land in the state of New Mexico either gets leased or gets traded for these purposes already, but there's a public input process that allows local communities and local folks to decide, which lands are available for this type of use. So that's the process that we should be going through. Now, I will say that despite everybody coming together in this huge victory and the Senate parliamentarian ruling against this last night, I think just maybe an hour or so ago, I think from what I saw, Senator Mike Lee is rewriting his proposal. And he thinks that he can make something work that doesn't violate the Byrd Rule, which is the first rule the rule that violated the previous language that he included out of his committee. And so he's trying to water down essentially what he has proposed, and he just doesn't get it. I got to say it. The guy does not get it. When both communities, Republican and Democrat communities across the West, come together to oppose this proposal and hammered him hard on it, including many of you who called his office and other offices, he's not giving up. He's coming back with another proposal. We haven't seen the full details of what that looks like, but the fight is not over. And so for all the veterans who enjoy the time outdoors that allows them to heal, that allows them to reconnect, and for many of our returning combat veterans that use lands for therapy, whether it's fly fishing or hiking or camping, that are so, these places that are so important to you, we're gonna have to keep fighting for that. And even if this doesn't succeed either, there will be more fights ahead. And so if we love it, we got to fight to keep it. And that's just a fight that's going to be ongoing. But I am glad that we started this caucus in the House, because it allows us to be that firewall in the House, a bipartisan firewall that's going to hold the line on public lands. It's something that we haven't seen before in Congress, but we've decided as this group to make it our priority. And folks should know that whenever they bring these proposals forward, especially in the House, that they're going to have to go up against the caucus to get anything, any type of support for any of their proposals. And so that's kind of the long and skinny of it. Just wanted to give you guys an update and some details about what's going on here. But again, I am so proud of everybody coming together. Just in New Mexico alone, yesterday, Secretary Burgum was in Santa Fe. I think more than 2,000 people showed up to let them know what we think about our public lands in New Mexico, which was really, really an impressive showing. And we've seen it across the West. And so please keep up the good work. Everybody who's doing that amazing work at Vet Voice and at BHA, thank you for rallying the troops. Thank you for getting your communities on board. Thank you for getting sportsmen and women off the couch, because usually if it doesn't impact something in our backyard, sportsmen are very hesitant to get involved in politics, rightfully so. If it was up to me, we'd keep politics completely out of hunting and fishing, but that's just not the case, because politics come to us. And it's our job to get off the couch and to participate in our civic duty and make a difference. So thank you, Janessa.
Thank you so much for being here, Congressman Vasquez, and for your and Congressman Zinke's leadership. We're so grateful to have you in Congress fighting this fight, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thank you all so much.
Take care. Well, Well, amazing to have the Congressman join us on a very busy day. Really excited to be putting this whole event together with our partners at Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Armed Forces Initiative. And I'm really excited to have two of their national board members with us today. I've got with us Garrett Robinson, who's a Marine Corps veteran and again, a board member at Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Armed Forces Initiative. And we've also got with us Hunter Owen, who is an Army veteran and the same. So Garrett, Hunter, thanks so much for being here this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Janessa.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Garrett, maybe we could start with you. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit of your story, who you are, how you got into this world, and what you've been working on the last couple of weeks.
Yes, ma'am. First off, again, thank you to you and the Vet Voice team for inviting us and putting this event on for both of us and for all the veterans out there, and then highlighting the Armed Forces Initiative and what we do for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And then thank you, Representative Vasquez, for joining us today, and thank you to the leadership that you and Representative Zinke have put forth in Congress. We need more voices like yours out there supporting these type of initiatives. So for myself, again, Garrett Robinson, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I did close to 30 years and retired as a Master Guardian Sergeant. And, I'm just a passionate outdoors person. I grew up in Southern Pennsylvania as in a family that, is very much into the outdoors, across the space, whether it's hunting, fishing, hiking, you name it. That's, something I just grew up with. In my later life, joined the Marine Corps out of high school. I ended up in Southern California, which is, might as well be a, foreign planet, for someone who grew up in, Southern Pennsylvania. So public lands became, my only opportunity to get out and recreate, regardless of what type of outdoor recreation that was. And, as I, my career bounced around quite a lot, every time I moved, had to find a new place that I could get out and do those things. Trying to learn a new area, trying to find new lands, and not knowing people, public lands become the hallmark of what I was able to recreate on. So I already had a pretty deep appreciation for the public lands that we have in this country. I was fortunate to have enough of that around me growing up to recreate on, that I knew the importance, but it became even more significant for me as I carried on my adult life and my career as a Marine. And then, fast forward a little bit to, time overseas, deployed. You come back from those experiences, and having public lands is, it's incredible. There was a lot of opportunity to get out there and just find solace, find peace, kind of recenter yourself. And, after, the experiences that we've had, the experiences that our brothers and sisters alongside of us had, and quite frankly, like there's just something about being out there that really brings peace to us, mentally, physically, and emotionally. I've spoke about this a lot in the recent times, that there's a lot of my fellow brothers and sisters that I wish had the opportunities to experience what I've experienced on public lands. They're no longer here, whether they gave their life in combat, or those that, quite frankly and bluntly, committed suicide because of the traumas that they've experienced, serving our country. And to me, is it a personal affront that people like Senator Mike Lee and those that support him would want to take away something that's so valuable to us as a nation, and valuable to us as veterans. And I firmly believe that, those that I, wish were still here and among the living, had the opportunity to experience these lands, and maybe they'd still be here today. So there's a little bit about myself and kind of the background on, the program.
Thank you, Garrett. I really appreciate you sharing that. And Hunter, I know you served in the Army. You've been doing this work for a while. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you think Senator Mike Lee might be missing in his intent to sell off these lands?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Hunter Owen. I'm an Army veteran. Spent most of my career with the 82nd Airborne Division before being medically retired. Multiple combat deployments, and I'm a DoD civilian currently working with a Special Operations Unit on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and still currently deploy frequently. One of the biggest things that Senator Lee is missing is how these public lands are utilized by our veterans and by people across America. So we don't have Gothic cathedrals. We don't have pyramids. We don't have ancient architecture. We have our public lands and our natural wonders. One of the biggest things that these places do for me is provide me some solace and the opportunity to kind of relax, reflect. Sorry about the dogs going off there. At the end of the day, when I come home from a bad deployment, like my last deployment when I almost took an Iranian one-way to the chest, I came home, sat down. I wasn't quite the father I should be. I wasn't the husband I should be. I wasn't the person I should be. One of the very first things my wife did was look at me and said, go honey, get outside. Couple hours later, I came back. I was recentered. I was myself again. I was healthier. I was happier. These places give us the ability to clear our heads and to kind of reconnect to something that is missing when we come home. And as Garrett stated, I just wish I had so many friends who have come home and put a gun in their mouth because they just couldn't take the demons that they brought back with them. And unfortunately, had they just spent a day or two out on these public lands recreating, I don't think those guns would have been placed in those mouths. These are very special places that need to be conserved.
There's actually research that the VA has done that shows that being outside, being in nature has dramatic effects on mental health. So much so that the Department of the Interior and the VA actually had a program to get veterans and military families out more on public land. So I really appreciate you sharing both of those really personal stories. I think we all know people who we wish we could have had the opportunity to get out there with and help them just see the perspective that sometimes an endless horizon can bring. I want to talk a little bit about the land that has been proposed for sale. I know at Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, you all have put together a pretty incredible map that shows both the parcels that are up for sale, but also stories of people who have had experiences out on the landscape, hunting, fishing, what have you. And I was just, I know that the senator over the last couple of days has said things like, this is useless land. It's land that nobody cares about. I personally, over the weekend, was in Yosemite, and I drove up from Southern California, and I had the map out as I was driving just to see all this useless land that was supposedly, would be good for, I don't know, a Walmart or a gas station or affordable housing or whatnot. And this is like stunning landscape. There are signs up to watch for wildlife because there are migration corridors. So like, what do you think about his characterization of the land that's supposedly for sale? What are your thoughts?
I'll let Hunter, chime in here because he has a personal story that is included on that story map that you were referencing, Janessa.
Yeah, so he's dead wrong. Like, just flat out, he's absolutely dead wrong. The man needs to get out of his office and go spend some time on some of these properties before he starts throwing these accusations. So one of the things that I think is really interesting is, these lands had the opportunity to be utilized in a manner in which Mike Lee is saying they should be utilized during 1890s. When we had the Homestead Act, these properties were intentionally not homesteaded, or at some point people just gave up trying to homestead them because they're tough areas. They're tough pieces of property. For anybody to think they're just going to walk out in one of these places and throw up a Walmart or throw up a housing unit, man, they got something else coming. Garrett and I spent some time up in the north side of the Brooks Range, which is some of the area that they want to sell off, hunting caribou. And I will tell you what, if anybody builds a Walmart out there, like, I'm going to buy in, because that is tough. It is tough walking, tough living. Like, it is a hard chunk of land. You get out in these spots, and as I described to you earlier, like I wish I could actually put good words to it, but like there's like a air that washes over you. I put it like this, right? As a veteran, and you go overseas, you deploy constantly. You're told, especially in the U.S. military, you are the absolute best. And in the 82nd Airborne Division, you get brainwashed a little bit more. And I know all you jarheads are brainwashed even more, but you are the best. You're invincible. Nobody can touch you because you're going to give it to the enemy. Well, when you come home and you have that mindset, and you go from I'm the guy or the gal, I am the hero, to a nobody overnight, because now you're in the civilian sector and nobody cares what you did overseas 12 months ago. They care what you're producing, what the ROI on your product is tonight, right? It's hard. It's very hard. So when you go sit in a tree stand, or when you go stand under a ponderosa pine, or when you're standing there watching muskox walk across a landscape like it's nothing that you just took 2 hours to cross because you're out of shape now, and this stuff's like walking on a waterbed, right? It recenters you and it makes you remember we're all about that big. We're all part of this bigger machine that is us, right? Mike Lee's dead wrong. He needs to get out there and go experience some of the stuff. Matter of fact, open invite. I will take him hunting and fishing. I will take him to some of my favorite pieces of public land. I will show him a good time. I will bring some of my veteran buddies. We will make fun of him, but it will only be as vets do with each other. So
I love that. I love that. I think we have an audience question, so I'm gonna we'll pull that up from Sue Brady. How can we make this a bigger issue so that more people are talking about it? It doesn't seem like people understand that if this passes and lands are sold, it cannot be reversed.
I think that it's a great question, and I think it's an easy answer. We're doing it right now with this town hall, and I think that the more that we can get out there, whether it's on social media, op-eds, writing, blog articles, posted all over the place. This is the kind of that message resonates, and the veteran voice resonates. So getting this out there, saying that it's important to all of us, it's important to our veterans, that the public does not support this, and making sure that people like Senator Mike Lee understand that, like, this isn't about Mike Lee. This is about the United States public. Our public lands belong to all Americans. The federal government holds those lands in trust for us. They are the custodians of our lands. And we are saying, this is what we want done with our lands, not what you want done with our lands, Senator Mike Lee. So I think the more that we can get out there on all platforms, whatever that is, and come together as an outdoor community, the better. This isn't about hunting. This isn't about fishing. This isn't about hiking. This is the outdoor community as a whole coming together, saying, like, these lands matter. They matter for ecosystem resilience. They matter for bringing our migration corridors together, providing opportunity for people to get outside. It's not a Western issue. It's not an Eastern issue. It's not a city issue. It's not a rural issue. It's an American issue. And we as Americans need to stand up and tell our elected officials that, like, no, you are wrong. This is what we expect you as our elected officials who represent us, the public. This is what we expect you to do. And if you're not going to support that, then quite frankly, we're going to elect you out of office.
Yeah, if somebody doesn't run on Take a Hike Mike, in the next time he's up for election, I will be, there'll be a big miss. It's right there. Garrett, Hunter, I want to thank you both for joining us. We'll bring you back in for the Q&A towards the end, but thank you so much for sharing your stories and for everything that you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Janessa. Appreciate it.
I'm really excited now to bring in Jonas Rides at the Door. Jonas is a Marine Corps veteran and has been an active advocate for public lands. This is my first time actually getting to meet him face to face, but he has organized, he has brought people in to meet with members, meet his elected officials, and so much more than that. So Jonas, thank you for being here. Just really appreciate you making time, and would love to hear a little bit more about who you are and why public lands are so important to you personally.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to always share my input and share my story. I did serve in the Marine Corps as a heavy machine gunner. I did 3 deployments to Iraq between 2004 and 2007. I was there in the first Battle of Fallujah. And then, I would say, like, it was very, very tough deployments. Lost a lot of people. I received a Purple Heart in 2004, July 2nd, coming up on 21 years now. Received shrapnel to the back of my lower back of my head, lost consciousness. And then, it felt like every deployment just got harder And so like when I got out, I was like, I felt really broken and lost, and, like still, still over in Iraq, and, had so much, had a lot of traumatic and, I felt like tragedies happen over there. So I came back, I was pretty lost, and, I'm from Montana, northern Montana. Grew up on the Blackfeet Reservation. It's right there, right next to the Rocky Mountains and the Canadian border. So when I got back, I just went out to those lands, went out to the Rocky Mountain front, and it was all public lands. And then, going in these places, and then, actually just finding peace for once, you know, you know, finding a place to like allow my mind to, calm down after, what I, most intense 4 years of my life, um, and yeah, these public lands really gave that to me. And, as I felt more connected, I guess you could say, because, I did put, myself on the line. Veterans write a check to this country, the blank check, that could come up, sometime that cost our lives. And yeah, and I feel like, we need to protect these lands. And then I guess especially around Montana and or around all the United States. But for me, there was a more of a spiritual connection, because I soon found out, like, me being Native American, that a lot of these lands, were already, somewhat used. Or in my case, there's a place that's called the Badger to Medicine, which is located on the Lewis and Clark National Forest. But for the Blackfeet people, that is like our what you'd call like our Genesis story. Like that is our where we believe that our creation story is, kind of like the Garden of Eden. But this is, located on public lands, and so like it became much more important to, protect those lands. And then yeah, then I did get the opportunity to get hooked up with Vet Voice Foundation actually in 2013, and have been, able to go out and talk to my representatives, but as well as other representatives around the country, and, talk to them and tell my story, and let them know like how actually like powerful these lands are. Just and like a lot of these places have history, that important to, a lot of people. And like the history goes back, a millennia, since time immemorial in some places. Um, and then yeah, since then I've been, talking to representatives, and, what I call, yeah, fighting the good fight now. To me, this is just like continuing service, for something I love, something that helped me, and continues to help me heal. And so, yeah, I thank you for letting me share my story, and, continuing to help and fight the good fight.
I think it's really inspiring to hear from folks who have been at this for years. Congressman Vasquez mentioned he was an advocate for public lands long before he was elected. You've been doing this work since 2013. And now I think one of the things that has really just blown my mind over the last couple of weeks is seeing folks from all corners of the political spectrum coming together to raise their voices, folks from all different backgrounds, all different corners of America, people who might not agree on a whole lot else, standing up to say, this is our heritage, regardless of where you're from. This is our legacy. This is the gift we're giving future generations. And I just don't think that Senator Lee understood, or actually maybe even the broader public, like I don't know if I've ever heard it vocalized so unanimously that this is something people feel really, really strongly about. How does that make you feel to see that kind of public show of force?
I mean, yeah, I like it. It's very encouraging, because because sometimes, yeah, you don't know what's going on up in Congress or even what Senator Lee is doing. It's all, and yeah, it is like, yeah, I don't know what, like, we've always been having to, argue with his office and him, about what he's actually trying to do. But yeah, it is. I mean, it does get stuff done once people come together, and, and I feel like that's what kind of moves them, is like when, that each time, like, we've had to fight him, like, he's always had this backlash, but he's always changed because of the public backlash, but he continues to do it. But then, yeah, we still need to keep hammering on him until, he's stops, or, hopefully he gets voted out.
It makes a difference. It's easy sometimes to feel like in this world we live in, we don't have any agency, and that all the special interests are always going to win. But I think, this week really showed me and reminded me that our voices really do matter, and using them and speaking up, whether it's on social media or calling the office, tagging the member, it actually makes a difference. So thank you, Jonas, for everything that you've done over the years to be an amazing steward of our public lands, and really grateful to have you here. Thank you so much. And please stick around. We'll bring you back in for the Q&A in a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm excited now to bring in Greg Buffundo. Greg is a Marine Corps veteran, a former wildland ranger and firefighter, and Greg is going to join us. Greg, are you in Eastern Washington right now? Where are you joining
Yeah,
from?
I'm up in Okanagan County in Eastern Washington, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection and background with public lands.
Yeah, thanks, Janessa. As you mentioned, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I'm a Cold War veteran, activated during Desert Storm, and deployed for that. Public service has always been in my blood and always been in my family. My grandfather flew a B-24 Liberator during World War II. My father was in the Air Force for 22 years and served for 3 different administrations in the White House. And so public land or public service is just always something that I've just always known. And so I joined, I signed up when I was 17, and I went to Parris Island, South Carolina when I was 18, and served in the Marine Corps for almost 10 years. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I still wanted to continue public service. I got into home building for a while, and it just wasn't very fulfilling. And so an opportunity came along to work in advocacy, which led to an opportunity to put a uniform back on and serve my fellow American again. And that was as a wilderness ranger for the U.S. Forest Service. And I did that for almost a decade until I was doged during one of these purges that happened. But I served not only as a wilderness ranger, I was a forest protection officer, I was a wildland firefighter, I was a resource advisor, and I was a wilderness emergency medical technician for the Forest Service. And the common theme that I see in all of these jobs, and this is true with my fellow service members as well, is that we always put ourselves between the danger and the American people. We always are the ones who stand up and say, "Send me," and we do that because of a sense of duty that I think someone like Mike Lee maybe just doesn't understand. And we don't do it for rewards. We don't do it for glory necessarily. We just do it for each other. And to see this haphazard attempt to sell off the very dirt that we sacrifice for, it's just painful. It just hurts. And I honestly just have to believe at this stage of the game that someone like Senator Lee that is his goal. He just wants to hurt the nation that we've worked so hard and shed so many tears for and bled for. And, his comment about useless lands is like saying that's a useless church. I've never walked into a church or a synagogue or a temple and not felt something. And when veterans, come back from a deployment, when Marines come back from overseas, when we need something that we can't get from society, public lands are always the answer. And I think that Americans sometimes forget that it's sort of this like lack of understanding. It's hard to describe. They're just always there whenever we need them. Mm-hmm. And because we don't go to them all the time doesn't mean that they're not incredibly important. Because, we don't live in a cabin way up in the woods doesn't mean that they're not important. And these lands are important to different people for different reasons. To me, public lands are my church. Public lands provided me an opportunity to serve my fellow American again. And, I've mentioned this on a town hall we did prior, that I remember being deployed and sitting and thinking, when I get home, the first thing I'm going to do is go to Dolly Sods, West Virginia. I couldn't wait to take off my Alice pack and put on my Kelty external frame pack and go on a backpack trip. And having the opportunity to be able to do that it's healing, it's restorative, but it's more than that. It's celebrating the spirit of the United States. We talk about, the first pioneers that went out west and the first folks that landed in Jamestown, and they were attempting to create something greater than themselves. And our public lands and our public lands history allow us to celebrate the creation of something that's greater than ourselves, and celebrate the sacrifices that all Americans have made to make the United States what it is today. And so I just think that Senator Mike Lee is incredibly short-sighted. I can't help but believe that there's some sort of personal gain in it for him personally, or his cronies or buddies back in Utah or whatever. I sometimes wonder, when are we going to start the boycott Utah campaign and, take that tack? Like, look, we're going to go to states that love our public lands, where their politicians love our public lands. Even my political representative here in the 4th District of Washington, who I vehemently disagree with on about 99% of all of his ideas, is Congressman Dan Newhouse, and he's in the Public Lands Caucus. Like, I agree with Dan that our public lands shouldn't be sold. And I just hope that as Senator Lee starts stripping out all this language in the bill, that he wakes up and he realizes that hurting veterans and hurting Americans in order for him and his buddies to make a buck is not only wrong for the United States, it's wrong for veterans, and it's wrong for him.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Greg. And that, I think when you go look at his Open Secrets page, where you can see all of his campaign donors, some of his biggest donors are developers and private equity groups. And it seems pretty clear the direct tie to wanting to sell off these lands to groups like that can afford to buy them for pennies on the dollar, by the way. Has some real personal interest for him. Greg, I want to really thank you for being with us. We're going to bring you back at the end for our Q&A, but thanks for everything that you do to steward public lands today. I know you manage trails in your professional life, and I just did want to ask you before you jumped if you've ever seen an Alice pack on the trail. Anybody rocking one of those out on a hike, or did those go the way they should have into the dumpsters of time?
Yeah, I still own an Alice pack, as a matter of fact. I put weight in it, and I do a workout with it. Maybe in 1991 I saw an Alice pack or two, but since then, no. I think Mystery Ranch wins the day these days.
The gear's gotten a little better. All right, Greg, we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Thanks again. So excited to have with us right now Ryan Callahan, who is the conservation director at Meat Eater and also a national board member with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Folks might follow him on a variety of different social media channels. Cal, it's awesome to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for making time. We're talking about the impact of the potential public land sell-off on veterans, on hunters and fishermen, and people who love the outdoors generally. Just would love to hear a little bit about your story, who you are, and why you're so engaged in this fight.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and Greg, I apologize for coming in partially through your talk, but I definitely love what you're saying. I think, boy, you're correct in the fact that we, in the case of Mike Lee, we have a politician who's, in the words of Sarah Palin, gone rogue, right? Like, this guy is rapidly not making friends in the American public, nor with his colleagues on the Hill. And it's clearly a personal issue that he's putting across on the American people. It's as plain as that. How we got here, I don't know. I got here because I decided to, sacrifice a lot of the things that a lot of people want out of the gate, which is money and stability and family, and try to be outside as much as possible. I am sounded a little bit like might sound a little disingenuous to the veterans community, right? I appreciate so much what you all do, and I'm not going to pretend to say like that was my calling. It's just I didn't appreciate authority. I like to chase girls, elk, and birds too much.
You would have fit right in. You would have fit right in the Marine Corps for sure. But I get it.
But yeah, big public lands is just where I found my thing, what I was good at, and it took me a long time to appreciate them because I was running under the assumption that everybody saw what I saw, and everyone I interacted with knew the value, and I got done with a guiding stint in the Frank Church Wilderness and made it home to Missoula, Montana at the time, and did what every buddy my age did when they got out of the woods, which was try to drink beer and chase girls. And a buddy of mine said, "Hey, we're going to this conservation group meeting," which was Backcountry Hunters and Anglers right when they first moved to Missoula, and like, don't worry, there's going to be free beer. And I learned at that meeting that there's all these people that didn't want wilderness areas to exist, and they didn't want public lands to exist. And I was just so struck by that for myself, for sure, but also because I guided only people from large population centers who had never been to these places before, and they were stressed out, high net worth individuals, and almost every single one of them had these transformative experiences on public land. And I literally saw like sleeping pill addicts not touch a pill or a pack of cigarettes by the end of their trip, and just understand. And I think like take solace in the fact that they were dropped into a spot that they couldn't control, that was bigger than them, and they could lose themselves in that space with so many unknowns and crazy dynamics. And it was a reset for these people. And the biggest win, whether they got an elk or a deer or birds or fish or whatever we were chasing, was watching that appreciation of these places form, when literally some of these people would make comments that the boat was on tracks, or I know this experience because I paid for it, just like I paid for a ride at Disneyland, or whatever else they were doing with their spare cash. And it was addictive for me, not to watch these people kind of become true appreciators and evangelists for these wide open spaces that they just really didn't know existed 5 or 10 days before that point. And I was asked there was a call to action of sorts in that room of like, does anybody guide out here? Is anybody making a living on these places? And I was one of those people. And the reality of guiding is a huge part of your job. Possibly the most important part of your job is getting to know people and understanding how to communicate with them in a very short amount of time. And that was something I could do, and I could kind of tell my story of growing up in these places and taking them for granted, and then kind of feeling this great sense of guilt and responsibility of like, holy hell, if I don't stand up for these places, they're going to go away. And
right.
They're such a huge part of my life and have given me so many opportunities that the minimum thing I can do, the very least thing I can do, is let people know that
Ryan, I think you're on mute. Did we lose Ryan's? Cal, we lost your audio. Well, while we're waiting to get Cal's audio back, I know there was a question in the chat about where that t-shirt's from. It's a Backcountry Hunters and Anglers piece of merch. If you go to their shop on backcountryhunters.org, you can find the public landowner shirt. So that is an awesome shirt. We're still having a little trouble with Cal's audio. JJ, why don't we go ahead and bring everybody back into the main room here. We'll move to Q&A while we wait for Cal. And I see Senator Mike Lee still not with us. No surprises there. I don't think he necessarily wanted to hear from this group of badass vets, but we will make sure to send him the video of this town hall in case he or his staff care to hear our perspectives. Meanwhile, let's go to Q&A. So the first question is for everybody, and really just feel free to jump in here, guys. However, but all of you are advocates. You've found a way to follow the news closely enough that you're you know how to get in touch with your member of Congress. But a lot of people are busy. A lot of people want to make sure they're taking an action that is effective and part of a larger community. So if people want to get involved and make their voices heard beyond social media or watching this, what are some ways that they can do that? And maybe Garrett, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is, well, I put it out there in the chat that everybody should have seen that the BHA is hosting the Flood the Lines, day tomorrow. So, I mean, all the information is there. Go in, call your elected officials, and then tell them exactly what we've been talking about here today. That, like, hey, the answer is no. We do not support your willingness to support the sell-off of public lands. The American people are speaking for their public lands that you, as a legislator, you as the federal government, are holding in trust for us. You are holding these lands in trust for us, so we're asking you to do what we're do this for us. The other thing is share on the socials. There is a ton of information out there across the entire outdoor space, whether it's BHA or what you guys are doing here with the Vet Voice Foundation and other outdoor organizations. As I said earlier, this is not a hunting, fishing, hiking, bird watching issue. It's an everybody issue. It's an American issue. It's an American outdoors person issue. So if you care about going out on these lands, whether it's looking at birds, looking at flowers, hunting elk, fly fishing, whatever it is, share that information on social and say that, no, I don't support this. Tag these legislators on social and so that they know. Do a video, a short little video clip, telling a personal story about why these lands matter to you, and tag those legislators again, because every bit of that information that we put out there matters and gets our voice out there.
Awesome. Cal, you've built quite a community online, both on your personal social media, but also through the Meat Eater community. Could you talk a little bit about that community and how people can get more involved if they're interested?
Yeah, and I do want to build off of what Garrett said and what you're doing, which is like God's work. Like, it really is. Like, vet voices matter, and our politicians want to divide and conquer, right? So I can go in there and talk, and they're going to be like, great, and I'm going to take you and I'm going to put you in this bucket. And then the next person that represents somebody from that bucket isn't going to matter as much. And if I can make an ask here, and I know there's been so much that's been asked of the veteran community, but you got to tell your stories. They really, really matter. And it can be short and just a moment in time, but you got to, and I've spoken with this with Hunter and Garrett not too long ago, but a lot of what we do out on these big public lands, right, is personal. It's for our personal benefit. It's for our time to get away and disconnect. And there's something about bringing that out and maybe like exploiting it is how it can feel that is wrong, and it's not why we do it. But right now, it's got to happen. It will move the needle. It will preserve these places, if not enhance them. And if you hold that stuff in, it's detrimental to the cause. And that next generation, like what Mike Lee's doing right now, I put it like this, right? Every season, there's a brand new bird dog getting started. And every season is that like last retirement walk for that dog that you've had for many seasons. And they're both equally important. And if you remove the ability for people to access these places, it's gone. And it's gone for a generation. And that has ripple effects down the line. We're becoming so detached from natural places where our food comes from that there's a not hyperbolic, very easy path to look down where this stuff does go away because people have just quit caring.
That's
because
right.
They just don't know what these places produce. They don't know why they exist. I was just on the Arctic plane, and I was drinking water that was gurgling up out of the aquifer that fell 1,000 years ago in the mountains. It took 1,000 years for that water to matriculate down and come back up. And when you think on these timelines and that scale, what we matter right now has a giant impact downstream. Our effects will be felt long after we're gone. And it's that responsible legacy that we can leave behind. And that's where that personal feeling of what we do outside will matter down the road, and we'll be long and dead, and we won't have to deal with the embarrassment of somebody thanking us for it.
I love that. And I think, Cal, do I see a little Arctic glare on your cheekbones there? Is that a little left over? Worth it for the experience. Very cool. And I really love that you use the term bird dog. Obviously we all know what that is in the sense of hunting, but I think we all need to be bird dogs ourselves with our members of Congress over the next few weeks and years, just to ensure that they know we're not going away. We're going to find them, and we're going to worry them. So I'm going to pass it back to Garrett, and then over to Greg.
Thanks, Jesse. I just had a kind of like a follow up there to what Cal's talking about, and he's being nice to Hunter and I. We were meeting with him 2 weekends ago at the BHA rendezvous, and he's right. We need to tell our story. So we're just I'm going to put my senior enlisted, Marine hat back on. We're just going to get information here. The boss just gave us the safety brief for the weekend, and the ask for me is that tell your story. And this, I'm telling you this because it's hard I know how it is for us as veterans. Whether we're active duty, whether we've just recently got out or we've been out for a while, we don't like talking about ourselves. Like being here today is something new for me too, in recent times. And, Cal charged us, from the AFI board to, hey guys, you need to tell your story. And we have not been good at that. And we're doing it now because the time matters to get this information out. It's not about me and how I feel. It's about how we as a community feel and about our story and making sure that the American people hear our story. And then most importantly, that these legislators hear our story. So that's me putting my grumpy Master Guns hat back on here and telling everybody hey, we don't have a choice here, guys. I'm going to get my knife hand out because I can do that as a retiree. And we're just going to get this done, guys. All right. Thanks.
Rah.
Yeah. Thanks, Garrett. I wanted to follow up on what Cal said about the different buckets. Something that I've always been an advocate for is making sure there's a seat at your campfire for anybody. And I think that one way we can support these initiatives and tell our story in a way without necessarily having to tell our story is by inviting somebody who doesn't typically partake in outdoor activities, whether it's hiking, hunting, fishing, whatever. Invite them to come join us. I think the once people experience the amazingness of America's public lands, that's not a memory they soon forget. And Hunter suggested earlier that he'd bring Mike Lee out on a hunt, and I'd love to go with you guys. I mean, I think that would be. I think that Senator Lee's disconnect comes from his disconnect. I mean, he only looks at public lands as being a profit generating factory, right? I don't think he looks at it in the same sense that the American public looks at it. And so not only can we, support this issue and fight these issues by joining organizations like BHA, supporting Vet Voice Foundation, supporting other NGOs, but we can invite people to join us on these trips. And then finally, the thing that I'd like to say as a former caretaker of these lands is be nice to your public servant. Say to the public servant, thank you so much for the job that you do. I mean, I've been hanging off of cliffs rescuing people in the North Cascades only to have them just walk away when they're done, and I can't tell you how many conversations I've had on the trail where you've come around the corner and somebody just starts laying into you saying, why aren't you managing these lands the way, the days of that is over. That kind of initiative only furthers the argument that we need to sell these things. And guys like Mike Lee and Bob Bishop and some of the others, their overall tactic was to underfund, underappreciate, overwhelm the public servant who's taking care of our public lands, so that they can then say, look, these agencies don't know what the hell they're doing. We'd be better off selling it. So we need to change that conversation, and we need to take control of that. To use the bird dog scenario, we need to pin that bird in the bush, and we need to hold it there until we're ready, until we're set up and ready, and then, it's game on. So those are a few things. Invite somebody, be kind to your public servant, get out there and tell your stories, support good grassroots organizations like VHA. And Vet Voice Foundation. I mean, I think that's how we'll win.
I super appreciate that, Greg. And, I think something that maybe a lot of people don't know is how many veterans work for our public lands agencies. 30% of the federal employees are vets. And, for those who maybe don't work for agencies like, the Forest Service or the Department of Interior, plenty more veterans, just like Cal got his start, make their living in the outdoor recreation economy. So, it is an issue that's near and dear to us for many different reasons. I know we're a little bit over time. Cal, I know you had a short window, so if you need to hop or if anyone else needs to hop, please feel free, and thank you for joining us. But if you can't stay, we'd love that. We're going to take a couple audience questions. I guess we're bringing back the Senator Mike Lee's opportunity in case he shows up to hear them. But let's go ahead and get a question up from the audience. This is from Heather Robinson. I asked Garrett yesterday, how can I help? That's my biggest question. I'm in Pennsylvania and I want to help. So we've talked a little bit about some of our options, but if folks have other ideas that they want to share, please go ahead and jump in.
Hey, Janessa, if we don't mind, I'll jump in real quick, Garrett. I think one of the biggest things that people could do to help out on top of the phone calls, the emails, is get involved. Find a local organization, volunteer with your local chapter of VHA, a veterans group, the VFW. Find something that is meaningful to you. Just take a couple hours a week and try to get involved. And if you're going to make these phone calls and send these emails to your reps, I think Greg said it best, is be kind. 9 times out of 10, when I call my senator or my congressman or my local rep, they're not answering the phone. It's their aide that's answering the phone. She doesn't want to be yelled at any more than I want to be yelling at her. So don't yell and scream at folks. Be kind to them. Use a little courtesy with them, and you're going to go a lot further with these folks. And then the second thing is find a local organization or find your local chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers or another organization that's near and dear to you, and just reach out and ask what you can do.
Great. We'll go to another question here from the audience. What exactly is Mike Lee's reason for promoting the sell-off, and do his own people support it? This question's from Kathy. Well, I'll just jump in here and say, I think Senator Lee's motivations are personal and financial. He's got a lot of donors in his corner who have supported him, who are, would like to develop public land, would like to be able to buy it for a song so that they can conduct extractive industries, mining, drilling, et cetera, on public land, even though we already have a process for that. And private equity groups. Public land is like one of the last valuable assets in America that is truly owned by all of us. The federal government is a steward of it for us. I think someone said that earlier, but I think this is the fight that many of us who love exploring the outdoors have encountered, trying to get access to a wild place that now some private homeowner or landowner has sealed off, and now we can no longer get out there, or you can't hunt there. So I think it's financial, and it's a mindset that comes from, I don't claim to know what's in another man's heart or a man's heart, but there's something about like having something that no one else can have. And I think it's fundamentally un-American. It's fundamentally against the spirit of protecting something that's greater than all of us, which is, I think, why many of us felt called to serve in the first place.
Yeah, I would follow up with that and just say that, I don't believe Mike Lee is a billionaire, but he's certainly a millionaire. And one thing that I found that lots of billionaires and millionaires don't like is being equals to working schleps like us. And public lands make us all equal, and they don't like that. And I think that might be one of his motives, that he just, if he gets rid of it, he's better than the rest of us.
I think we have time for one more question. This is from Stanley. I'm concerned that high net worth individuals are driving this move to sell off public lands. They got the crazy mountains in Montana. They want it all. Kind of in line with what we were just talking about. There's a lot of folks on this call have successfully worked to protect places and keep them open. So just any perspective from any of you about, this isn't the first time we've had this fight. This was just sort of the most grandiose and egregious kind of public lands sell-off attempt that I think we've ever seen as a country. So just any thoughts on ways that we've pushed back in the past, tactics you've seen that are successful? Any thoughts from the group?
Just be relentless. You can't quit. I wrote an article for BHA a while back that talked about how the fight for the conservation and keeping our public lands in public hands reminds me a lot of the fight for ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria over the last 20-something years, right? Every time you get one down, boom, and next one pops up, and you just got to stay relentless. It's not going to end. I'm not going to speculate on to motivations as to why this is happening, but it's happening, right? We just got to stay involved. We got to stay after it, and we got to stay relentless in our pursuit to make sure these things stay where they belong, and that is owned by all Americans, not just 1% of America.
I think the corner crossing lawsuit that just went through in Wyoming, where the individuals set up a ladder and crossed from one corner to another on a couple of 40-acre parcels, that's relentless. That's bringing the fight to the folks who want to sell off this land. And I think we need to take the whatever the lesson is from that and use tactics like that to prove to the courts, or for the courts to own up to the fact that we all own these lands equally, and that some rich dude can't buy a giant ranch outside the crazy mountains and illegally close the road 7 times and get the district ranger there fired a couple of times, and because they don't own it, we own it.
And how do we effectively take a backyard issue and make it a national issue, right? So the crazies started as an easement dispute.
Yeah.
If you type in easement into the Google machine, all the top hits are law firms that specialize in getting rid of perpetual easements. And when we talk about corner crossing, that's something that we were effectively able to elevate into a national issue with great help. And we've joked about sending Iron Bar Holdings a big pile of thank you letters for elevating this issue through the courts, because we wouldn't be here if they didn't want to prevent public access to public ground. But that became a national issue overnight, and one that everyone was able to weigh in on. So, hunters, anglers, we have our special spots, especially on public land. And it's tricky to be able to share those personal private spots, or risk a little more pressure on those places in order to protect them or ensure that people can get to them for generations to come. So stay connected. And like Greg was saying, we got to stay able to bring other people into this tent with us and say, I don't care who you voted for. I don't care what you do. If you care about this issue, we can work together.
That's awesome. Jonas, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to add. I mean, yeah, try to get everyone involved. I remember, a great conversation starter for me is like just go asking, my friend or family member, hey, do you know our public lands are under attack? And then most of the time they're like, no, and then you could tell them, and then just keep that going. Tell everyone get everyone involved, and have them know that our public lands are under attack. We need to get the word out.
Yeah, you're right. I guess we should thank Senator Lee for really making it clear to people who didn't know or might not have been aware that our public lands are under attack. That he really elevated the issue for us. So I guess I will give the senator a thanks for elevating the fact that there are special interests out there who want to privatize and sell off our heritage, and in a sort of backwards way, I guess I owe him a little gratitude. But gentlemen, I just want to say thank you again for making time. This was so great. Fantastic to have so many Marines on one screen always. But Hunter, appreciate your service as well and your ongoing service as a DoD civilian. Cal, thanks for all you do to help raise awareness and educate people. You just can't replicate the work that you do, and we're really grateful that you made time for us. There are some links in the chat, but if you want to get more involved, backcountryhunters.org and vvfnd.org if you are a veteran and want to get involved with Vet Voice Foundation. In addition to advocating for public lands, we help elevate the voices of vets and military families on issues that are really important to them. So if you're concerned about what's going on in Iran, or you've got some thoughts about what else we can do to make our country a stronger place, we'd love to have you in the fight with us. So again, thanks to everyone for joining. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to talking again soon. Take care.